Okay, so today's lecture, to do a lot of talking. Today's lecture, so kind of bear with me on all the talking. Try to stay as focused as you can. If you're just listening to this, just take lots of breaks. Keep coming back to it. Talking about some important stuff. A lot of different ways it's important. Definitely for your practice, for the exam, all that sort of stuff. Stress. Stress is something we all deal with to certain degrees. If you don't feel like you have any stress or deal with stress, either you're in total denial or you're probably not human. A lot of stress right now, over COVID, a lot of things going on, a lot of people definitely dealing with a lot of different kinds of stresses. When you go through your questions for today that you have to submit, one of the questions is, can you think of two things that are causing stress in your life? Take a minute to think about that. I don't need to kind of be on the couch, kind of deep, involved things that are causing stress. Private things, definitely don't need to share that. But if there's things that are probably similar things that we're all kind of dealing with, I'm going to ask people in a second. I'll share some things that are causing stress, or one thing that's causing stress for me right now, and I think in kind of subtle ways, definitely talking about COVID. It's made teaching harder with Zooms and masks and all these different things and going online and quarantining, all that sort of stuff makes it a little bit harder, but it doesn't seem, on the surface, it doesn't seem that bad. But then it kind of accumulates. It's kind of like a subtle stress in some ways. In other ways, it's not so subtle. Harder to do the things I like to do, been doing in the past, like a lot of us. Or if you do those things, especially with all this Omicron breakout stuff in Maine, you feel a degree of fear, a degree of guilt, maybe not even that aware of it when you're out. It's like, oh, is that person sick? That sort of thing. Why aren't they wearing a mask? Are they vaccinated? So it's always there. It's kind of always like a noise in the background, and I think it really is cumulative. I think it's all affecting us all kind of in different ways. Definitely support systems are very helpful. Healthy outlets that you can find are definitely helpful at this point. College students, leading causes of stress. This seems to be more and more so. Current generation of students coming through. My son is same age as most of you in this room, and he is a student too, so he's dealing with similar kind of stresses that you guys are dealing with. So I know it's very, very real. I know the anxiety is real and all that sort of stuff. A lot of stuff around grades and all that sort of stuff. Peer pressure seems to be more intense than ever. Here's our questions for today. Stress is a big part of what we do as OTs. It kind of underlays a key part of all this different stuff. When we're dealing with somebody with a different, we think that we're just dealing with this different medical, clean little medical diagnosis, but there's always stress related to that diagnosis. Stress with the client, stress with their family, health issues cause stress, and this leads to this cycle of issues and more medical issues related to the stress kind of stuff. What does AOTA say about it? The occupational therapy profession promotes the establishment of healthy habit patterns. When we talked about habit patterns, that's kind of the key cornerstone to living a more healthier, stress-free kind of life. Familiar and predictable routines. We talked about routines last week, to getting those good, healthy habits. Increased engagement in meaningful occupations to serve both as protective and healing factors in combating the negative effects of stress. And stress causes health problems. There's a direct connection between stress and health. We'll see that very vividly today. OT practitioners develop evidence-based interventions based on this philosophy and conduct research to establish efficacy for coping with stress. So it's a big part of what we do. What is stress? Any change you encounter, wear and tear on the body, inability to cope with problems, especially when it starts to impact your ability to kind of function on different levels, loss of emotional control, absence of inner peace. I kind of like that one. I think probably a lot of us may be struggling with inner peace right now. Stress is a perceived threat. real or imagined, to our mind, body, spirit, or emotions. Different kinds of stress. There is actually good stress. A lot of you use this good stress to succeed in school, and at your jobs, your careers. You're stressed about an exam, so you study. But if you get too stressed over the exam, you kind of flip into this distress kind of category. You can't perform. You have that test anxiety. You studied your butt off and you're really prepared, but you can't get your brain to think. Great example of this too is like when you're doing public speaking. You feel totally prepared, you get up there and you just kind of freeze. Too much distress. Toxic stress, childhood trauma. We'll talk about that in the second part of this lecture. And then this kind of neutral stress, neither good nor bad. Here's a good thing to talk about what I was talking about, how the eustress, which is good stress, is good to a degree, then it's too much. It becomes distress, and it impacts your performance. A number of ways to look at stress. The boundaries kind of blur. Acute stress, fight, flight, freeze. There's another category to this: fight, flight, freeze, and then kind of fainting. Your body just kind of gives out. Repeated incidents of acute stress have a cumulative effect. We'll talk about the ACE study. Chronic stress can be really, really hard on your health. Dealing with poverty, racism, or health disparity over a long period. A lot of the stress you're dealing with now in school is very temporary. For an exam, to get through classes, get through graduate school, that sort of thing. Sources of stress. The big one, obviously, as OTs, is illness. Other sources of stress: toxins, imbalances, dietary stress, fear, worry, shame, psychological stress, psychosocial relationships. This is a big one that causes stress. For some people, it's a psycho-spiritual thing. Crisis of values, meaning and purpose. Why am I here? A lot of times that comes up when you've experienced loss, grief, kind of stuff. Other new ones, techno-stress. A lot of us are dealing with techno-stress, kind of information overload, multitasking, dopamine high. We're getting kind of addicted to our social media kind of things. Overstims can impact our ability to focus. A lot of research out showing all this tech stuff, you get too into it, causes symptoms of ADHD and ADD, which cause all kinds of problems. Ability to focus, social skills, all these sorts of can all be related to too much technology, too much living inside a virtual world. Occupational stress. Responsibilities or demands outweigh possibilities. We get into this in ergonomics, where you have jobs where they expect more than you're capable of doing. You can't keep up, kind of thing, causes stress. Now we're going to get into more complicated stuff. This is more the physiology. The neurophysiology of stress, the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system. It's a really delicate balance. Lose one, it starts to cascade to the other and starts to impact your health. That's kind of the bottom line. I'm going to get into the physiology here. Some of it's kind of review or stuff you haven't got into yet in neuro. The brain, where all kind of starts, as we know, the brain, different parts of the brain. We have different levels to the brain. These are the kind of really basic levels, a little more sophisticated and highly sophisticated. You can see how, like, evolution, we're kind of down here, for centuries and then thousands of years, and then we kind of evolved into this higher level executive processing, frontal lobe stuff. This is really what makes us human. We talked about the frontal lobe with impulsivity last week. So it makes us human. This is more like where we used to be, more like our pets and animals are kind of down in these systems. Limbic system, emotions, part of stress. Neocortex, so we keep rationalizing. This is how you deal with stress, manage stress, the higher levels. You don't let it overwhelm you. You use strategies, techniques to kind of deal with it. The limbic system, big part of what we're looking at, this emotional processing center, processes the emotions, the threat. You see the tiger comes right through the limbic system, activates the autonomic nervous system and the endocrine system. You have this cascade of things through the hypothalamus, linked to the nervous system by the pituitary gland. That's the master gland, activated with the thalamus, releases all these different hormones. Amygdala is where the fear first goes. Hippocampus regulates memory, especially long-term memory. Hippocampus, right next to the amygdala. A lot of connections between impacts of long-term stress and memory. Stress affects your memory. Right next to each other in the brain. Research. Related long-term stress can shrink hippocampal brain cells, decreasing memory. Stress is toxic to your brain. They pretty much know that right now. Long-term chronic stress is toxic to your brain. It's killing brain cells, and it's extreme kind of thing. Again, we're talking usually long-term severe stress, or abuse, kind of childhood trauma kind of stress, what it does to the brain, what it does to the memory. We do know, again, though, on the positive side, the brain has that neuroplasticity. It can recover, can regrow, and fix itself to a degree. The nervous system is kind of review. You have the parasympathetic, sympathetic ramps you up. Parasympathetic calms you down. Dilating pupils, constricting them, all this sorts of stuff. Increasing your heart rate, decreasing your heart rate. This is really where we have to work as OTs, activating that parasympathetic system. This really helps us calm ourselves down. Sympathetic system. Fight, flight, or freeze, energy expenditure, stress reactivity, really ramps up the epinephrine, also known as adrenaline. Norepinephrine assists the epinephrine, and really you're just ready to attack, ready to run, ready to freeze. Prepares body for rapid metabolic changes, and physical movement involves energy expenditure in the moment. Autonomic nervous system, calming them down, calming you down. Hugs can help calm you down, calming environments, warm cup of tea, that sort of thing. Releases acetylcholine, relaxation, calming, allow cells to regenerate, return to homeostasis, your natural balance. What was that thing? Inner peace. Activating the parasympathetic helps us attain that inner peace that we all want. Endocrine system. This is kind of the hormones, the glands throughout the body that regulate metabolic functions, interconnect with the brain and nervous system, pituitary gland, thyroid gland, adrenal glands. Endocrine system, the thyroid gland, we're kind of breaking it down now. Secretes long-term impacting hormones which increase metabolism, also increases thyroxine, which causes increased blood pressure, heart rate, metabolic rate, depth of breathing, respiration, increased anxiety, and fatigue. The pituitary glands, influenced by the hypothalamus, this is that cascade of things. You have a little chart. You see that? We'll kind of fill that in. You need to know this little cascade, this emotional response. There'll be questions, could be questions on the midterm on this. Pituitary glands, influenced by the hypothalamus, releases ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, and commands the adrenal glands to really rev you up with stress. This is a key part of your stress response, all these adrenal glands, to increase stress hormones such as vasopressin, also called ADH, antidiuretic hormone, which regulates blood volume and therefore blood pressure linked to hypertension. The adrenal glands are called the stress gland, believed to have the biggest impact on stress. This is a number of hormones including cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Cortisol is the big one. When they measure how people are dealing with stress, they do all these research around stress. We'll look at this health disparity kind of thing next week, and they're trying to measure how individuals or folks dealing with poverty, how much stress that causes in their life. What they do is they measure the amount of cortisol in your blood. The amount of cortisol in your blood is probably a lot higher before a neuro exam than it is on the weekend or something. What does cortisol do? It stimulates glucose, which is sugar, regeneration in the liver for immediate response. It's okay for a quick response, but bad if it's long-term. And this long-term cortisol release actually ends up suppressing your immune system. This is why students get sick towards the end of the semester, sick around times of exam. Too much cortisol, chronic cortisol, suppressing your immune system. You catch that cold, you catch that bronchitis, that sort of thing. Also increases your cholesterol. Terrible for diabetes. We see so many patients with diabetes. They're under stress, so their body's under stress. Whacks their blood sugars all out of whack. You can even suppress your growth. Inhibit reproductive hormones. You could stop having your period. Affects areas of brain functioning, the control of attention, memory, planning, and behavior. Think of ADHD. Think of these kids dopamine high all day and gaming. Is it releasing too much cortisol that's impacting their ability to attend? Memory, planning, behavior control. It may indeed be doing that. Adrenal medulla, adrenal cortex. The adrenal gland made up of the adrenal cortex and medulla sits upon the top of each kidney and is cone-shaped in appearance. The neuroendocrine pathway. Here's our big pathway we need to know. The hypothalamus in the limbic system immediately activates the sympathetic nervous system or fight or flight by the nerves through the HPA axis. This is the axis you need to know. Hypothalamic pituitary adrenal gland axis. Messages are sent from the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland, which sends ACTH to activate the adrenals to release a flood of stress hormones for fight or flight via the bloodstream. Here it is. The hypothalamic HPA axis is our central stress response system. It's a big part of our stress responses. And that's why we're asking you to kind of know this. It's actually basic kind of neurophysiology kind of thing. It's an elegant, very dynamic intertwining of the central nervous system and the endocrine system. Stress, exam, impacts the brain. The hypothalamus releases CRH to the pituitary gland, which releases ACTH to the adrenal glands. There's cortisol. And it's all these metabolic effects. And goes back and kicks in the pituitary gland again. Just keeps happening over and over again. And okay, short term, not good long term. Simplified. Our CRF is released from the anterior hypothalamus. The CRF in turn activates and releases ACTH from the pituitary. The ACTH then activates the adrenal cortex to release cortisol and aldosterone, which increase metabolism, body fluids, impacting blood pressure and blood glucose levels. There's our tiger to the brain kind of thing. And we'll try to fill this out. We'll break it down. Homeostasis and illness. Difficulty returning to homeostasis impacts the cardiovascular system, digestive system, musculoskeletal system, and immune system. Wear and tear through the long-term stress sets the stage for disease and illness. Everything, even your muscles, your immune system. Your muscles are tight all the time. You're going to be getting all these things like carpal tunnel and shoulder impingement. You're going to have a hard time eating. How does stress affect your body? All these different systems. How does it affect the cardiovascular body? This is the number one system where stress really goes after. Your heart rate, all of heart disease related things to stress, constricts the blood cells. Increases force of contractions, increases blood glucose, fatty acids, cholesterol, those terrible things. Gastrointestinal, decreases saliva, contractions of the esophagus, increased stomach acid, changes in peristalsis, other increased tension in skeletal smooth muscles, increased perspiration, decreased skin temperature, immune system is weakened. Stress in the body. During stress, the body puts future-oriented processes in the body on hold. Related to feeding, fighting infections, certain types of learning, that short-term thing. Stress impacts the immune system, suppresses it. Cardiovascular system causes heart disease, heart issues. Nervous system and shrinking brain cells. You age faster. Causes all kinds of inflammation in your body, which leads to all these kinds of problems. Affects your moods, affects your muscle tone. It's just bad news to the body. Complex cascade of events associated with acute threat. Increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, increased vasodilation, increase all these different things that go on in your body when you get stressed. Illnesses which can be caused, exacerbated by stress. Migraines, irritable bowel syndrome, ulcers, heart disease, temporomandibular joint dysfunction, jaw pain, all those repetitive stress injuries, getting the cold, autoimmune disorders, all the stuff that we see all the time when you're out there working, all impacted, made worse, in some cases directly caused by stress. What's the take-home message here? The stress response involves a cascade of stress hormones throughout the body. It involves both the nervous system and the endocrine system. Cortisol plays a huge role in the stress response. The strength of the stress hormone cocktail depends on the intensity and duration of stress. Repeated chronic stress shrinks brain cells. Toxic stuff. All right, we're going to take a break, and we're going to move on here.